Well, I tell you what, Calvin, are we about ready to start taping here?
Yes.
Well, Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, we'll do the roll call, Roger. We're just about to do the roll call.
Great. I'm hooked in, so let's
You are
go.
hooked in. That's right. Looks like things are off to a good start this week. Okay, it is now 7:37 p.m. And so, good evening, fellow commissioners and the general public. My name is Michael Champness. I'm the chair of the Transportation Advisory Commission. Before we begin, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the county website and on YouTube. To conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by new state legislation FOIA, the Transportation Advisory Commission needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It's a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. First, because each member of this commission is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all the other members. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. I'm asking each commission member participating in this meeting to state your name and location from which you are participating when I mention your name. At large, Linda Sperling.
I am present, participating from my home in Clifton, Virginia.
Thank you very much. Braddock District, Kevin Morris.
Back. I didn't miss the motion to adjourn, did I?
Not yet, not yet.
So I'm here from Burke.
Okay. Dranesville District, Mike Champness, I am here. Hunter Mill District, Kelly Westenhoff.
I'm here from my home in Reston.
Yes, welcome. Glad you could be
Welcome
here.
back.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mason District, Roger Hoskin.
I am here in my home in Mason District at congested Seven Corners.
All right, sounds good. Mount Vernon District, Pete Sitnick.
I am here. Hopefully you can hear me. Looking forward to a good meeting, and I'm in Mount Vernon District.
Okay, sounds good. Lee District, Alexis Glenn.
Good evening. I'm here from Alexandria.
Fantastic, thank you. Providence District, Jeremy Hancock.
Oh, get off mute and say it again, Jeremy Hancock in Falls Church.
All right, sounds good. Springfield District, Eric Thiel. Okay, and no Eric has had some trouble. Hopefully you can join us a little later. We'll keep an eye out for him.
Well, I clicked on the link in the email and it was the wrong link. So
Selling us.
send more than one link, they should probably be the same.
Hint, hint.
I think that point's been noted.
Okay, we can hear Commissioner Thiel complaining, so he's obviously here. Where are you complaining from?
Dark Side of the Moon, also known as Fairfax Station.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Sully District, David Skiles.
Present, participating from Chantilly.
Fantastic. Again, welcome, David. Glad you could be here. Okay, Fairfax Area Disability Services Board, Mary Pauline Jones.
I am present from my home in Herndon, Virginia.
Fantastic. Well, do have to note that we have everybody here. We have complete participation of all TAC members. So, yay! Glad we could do it. Okay, at this point, I will pass the virtual gavel to Vice Chair Mary Pauline Jones so that I may be heard to make the requisite motions.
Thank you. I accept the virtual gavel. I now recognize Commissioner Champness.
Thank you. I move that we have determined that each member's voice can be adequately heard by each other member of the commission. It is so moved.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It is in second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. I next move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for this commission to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting. I further move that this commission may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by the Microsoft Teams online platform or by calling 1-571-429-5982 and entering the phone conference ID 692-790-810. The phone number for ADA is 711. Access information is also available at the TAC website, the Fairfax County Government website. It is so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second that from Mount Vernon.
Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you. Finally, I now move that all of the matters on the agenda previously furnished and posted on the TAC website necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of this commission's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities.
You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Mr. Chairman, the motion is carried unanimously. I now pass the virtual gavel back to the chairman.
Thank you very much. We will now start the tax business per the approved agenda. And so the first order of business, chair's remarks, I should say. I have no remarks to open the meeting. And so we welcome public and guests. I know we've got two esteemed guests, longtime folks with us, obviously Calvin and Noel. Appreciate you being with us this evening. Is there anybody else here that I've not recognized that is attending the meeting this evening? Okay, sounds good. And I'll check the lineup along the scroll at the bottom as well too. So now we moved on to acceptance of the previous meeting's minutes. Calvin has distributed the meeting minutes as edited by Commissioner Morse. We'd be pleased to entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Morse. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to adopt the meeting minutes as edited. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Calvin, in page 3, the first line of one of the edits I made there, the first sentence at the end, it says each outage. So there's an extra space between the word and outage should be lowercase. Just a technical change.
The chairman noticed that and we already fixed that, yeah, but I didn't send it out, yeah.
Thank you.
Noticed moments ago, yes. So Kevin and I have now made our contributions for the course of the evening. Kevin, you want to make a motion to adjourn now? I'm joking. Please don't.
No, my contribution was bigger.
Clearly, you added more edits. Okay. Is there any more
Motion's on the
discussion?
table.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'd like to call the question on the motion. All those in favor of accepting the meeting minutes as edited and discussed, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? Fantastic. The meeting minutes are adopted unanimously by voice vote. So thank you very much. Now, moving on to the first topic on the agenda. And Noel, very much appreciate you sticking with us for not one, but two presentations. Figure rather than drag you back, although we're welcome at any time, we do it back to back, and the topics did seem to fit there. We wanted to get it, obviously, see how the legislative update went and some of the funding overview there. So with that, welcome, Noel. Thanks very much as always. Look forward to the legislative update.
Thank you all for having me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, but it should just be, the first is legislative. I'm going to just click on use the final report to the board for the General Assembly session. I believe Calvin sent you all the link today. So you can follow along if you want, or you can look at it later. It's a very large document. I will not be going over all 200 pages. I'll be going over like 5. So 1 second, let me go ahead and share. Okay, do you all see my screen? It should be a PDF and the top should say funding core services.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to zoom in just a little bit so we can see it. So first, I've just just a precursor, the General Assembly session, the 2022 session, started back in January. It's technically not done yet. I'll get to that a bit in the budget. But they did have an in-person session this year. Last year, 2021, they actually were remote for the most part. They had in session, like they were partially in session, but no public was allowed. We were all allowed to participate electronically. This year, public was allowed to come in, participate. It did make for an interesting situation where some rooms had spacing, some didn't. The crowds weren't quite as heavy as they were in years past. But at the end of the day, I think they made it work. There were some cases of COVID that they had to deal with. And how you could tell that is generally, if somebody misses because they have to be at home or they have a cold, they just aren't there that day. But if you had to miss because of COVID, and because of, as we all know, it can be contagious, they were allowed to participate remotely, but only for this. So you knew who had actually was out with had come down with COVID due to them actually being able to vote and or speak electronically, because they generally don't require that. So it did make an interesting session, but like I said, they finished they finished a lot of things. They've gone through their veto session and acted on many things. They are still in a special session. They have not yet completed the budget and some various bills, about I think 40 or 50, that may or may not have budget implications. They will have to come back before July 1 because they need a budget. I do not have yet any information on when that will be. Somebody asked me that just a couple of days ago, last Thursday, and they said, do you know when they're coming back? I said before July 1. So that's all I have right now. I'm sure there's some other dates in there too, but that's pretty much where things are.
But
I'm just
asked if I could, do they need to be in by July 1, can go as long as they want, or they need to be finished by July 1?
They need to be finished by July 1. They need a budget to keep the government rolling because that is when their budget expires.
So they'll be back June 27, 28, something like that. Got it.
Well, I'm guessing they need a couple of days to kind of, you need to backtrack a bit to get things prepared for July 1. But yes, they've gone pretty late into June before. I don't know how late into June they can go.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm just going to go over some of the transportation things. I'm going to kind of go in the order of how things were put in the legislative program. So that's my rationale, just to let you all know. So first off, as far as regional transportation funding, as you all know, we've been trying to make NVTA whole for the past several years. The General Assembly diverted funding from NVTA back in 2018. They needed to make about $154 million annually to address WMATA's state of good repair. They did that. However, $102 million of that was done at the expense of local and regional revenues. And we have been arguing since that time that we need to be made whole because that took money from existing projects that were also important. To date, they have provided back about 63.5 million, which is a good chunk, but it's still not the whole 102 that was originally diverted. So we're continuing to keep an eye on regional transportation funding. Well, there were
WMATA is still not in good repair.
Well, yes, I will say that some of that money has been put to good use. It's not always greatest for our riders at the moment, but all of the platform work that was done first on the blue and yellow line a couple of summers ago and the one that was done in the orange this past summer as well, a lot of that is a state of good repair money that it was fixing the rails and the platforms that had to be done. So that money is going to good use.
Yeah, you're correct. It wasn't for the rail cars. You're right.
So that being said, there was no bill this year to address that, so we are still looking to be made whole in upcoming years. The only bill that I really want to know about that would have had an effect on regional revenue, Senator Surville had a bill that was intended to fund bicycle and pedestrian projects, not associated with road widening projects. However, he did that by diverting 10% of NVTA revenues, both the local and the regional pot, as well as some federal revenues that are allocated to the state to a new process. There were some concerns by diverting additional money that we're still trying to be made whole by ourselves, by other entities. So he ended up changing that to then be an evaluation undertaken by NVTA, NVTC, localities, the Commonwealth, to come up with the list of what the bicycle and pedestrian needs were going to be. At that point, everybody kind of settled. There weren't a lot of comments there, but everybody settled and they kind of figured this was coming. But then that passed the Senate fairly overwhelmingly, 35-4-1. I think one person voted present. However, and it did get out of a House committee, but once it was on the House floor, it was re-referred to another committee, and so it did not move forward. There was not enough time to act on that. Continuing on to transportation funding statewide. There were a couple of bills this year having to do with statewide funding. You may have heard of them. I know our board had some comments on them, as have others. Specifically, there were bills related to gas tax, and I want to start there. There were several iterations of those.
Question?
Sure, I can't see
Hi,
who's
this is
asking
Eric.
though.
It's Eric.
Go ahead.
That previous set of funding mods, that, doesn't sound very fair from my perspective. Are there other places in the state that got money diverted and taken away from them just like we did, or are we unique?
Not necessarily. I will say we're one of the main parts of the Commonwealth that has regional revenues that are directed to a certain point. Other areas currently are, you see more regions getting these regional authorities, but we're one of the oldest ones who's had it. And no, we feel that, the state made a commitment to find the 154 million, and they did that by pulling 102 million from the locale, from the region. That the state effort was necessary, and that's what we've pushed for. And again, 63.5 million of that they've figured ways to address that. Some of that with new regional revenues, some of that with statewide revenues that has been provided to the region. But there hasn't been, and I can't be certain in all time, but to my recollection recently, there has not been an issue where, some facility in another part of the state needed help, and as opposed to giving statewide revenues, they took money from the regional. At least at the General Assembly legislative level.
Thank you.
Well, could you clarify that for me? Are we taking an annual hit for money diverted to? Okay, so every year now for 3, this is the 3rd year, we're going to be.
It's reduced over time. So the bill that diverted the money, that was 102 million in 2018. 102 of the 154 was from regional sources. And part of it was they took some of the money that NVTA had been putting to regional projects. They also have this section where the localities actually have to pay a part of that. So we actually get a bill from DRPT that we sent to DRPT that then they then sent to Metro. Yeah.
What's the cumulative figure then that we're out so far?
Well, that's where it gets complicated, because the first year was 102. In 2019, they enacted another bill dealing primarily with I-81, and that had some truck usage fees, and that was supposed to give us back about 20 million a year. The first couple of years were really low in that it was like 3 or 6 million as opposed to 20. That is starting to creep back up. And then in 2020, they gave us some more revenue, about another 50. And then those truck revenues had creeped up to 63. I mean, to about 15 or so. So that's where we're getting the 63 number. So cumulative over the past couple of years, I would say 80, 50, maybe about 200 million over the past 3 or 4 years, but I'd have to double check on that. That's just me thinking off the top of my head.
No wonder we're having trouble getting the Braddock Road multimodal funded.
We got some money from that from Smart Scale from the state for that. So at least phase 1. But yeah, so continuing on to statewide. So gas tax. There were a couple of bills that would have addressed gas tax in a couple of ways. There was, I think the main quote unquote vehicle, no pun intended, was a bill that would have, so to go back in 2020, the General Assembly passed a bill, a multimodal omnibus transportation bill. And one of the things it did was it raised the gas tax 5 cents that first year and 5 cents the second year because revenues aren't what they used to be. The bill that was the main vehicle, which was HB 1144 and SB 541, would have reduced that by that second 5 cents. So dropped the entire statewide gas tax by 5 cents for a year. And then, by 5 cents and the diesel tax by 6.2 cents. And then they would return to the current rates the following year. According to the state's own fiscal impact statement, those would have reduced revenue to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund by $275 million in 2023, and additional significant reductions thereafter. That bill passed the House. It died in the Senate. It is in the House version of the budget. It is not in the Senate, and the state does not have a budget yet. So that's where that is. There was other bills that would have done other things with the gas tax, either eliminate it completely or do some other things. Those did not move forward. So the only bill from the regular session was this 5 cent reduction. As you all have heard, as we all have seen in the news, the governor did make a proposal to get rid of the statewide gas tax for 3 months and then increase it incrementally and then cap what the indexing was thereafter. That bill has been considered during the General Assembly special session. That is approximately a $470 million hit to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. That did not move forward in the Senate when the Senate Finance Committee considered it. In the House Finance Committee considered it, and then they referred it to House Appropriations. House Appropriations has not acted yet, but that is still out there with all of these bills that are still being considered. So that's where that is. So the Senate has dispatched with it. It has gone in the Senate, but it's still around in the House.
So by July, we have at least 2 bills that could potentially reduce the gas tax revenue.
Yes, and I don't think they would do both, honestly. And I also know that the Senate has serious concerns with doing either. They've killed both of those versions in the Senate. Our concern has been that, and the argument that has been made for doing this, as well as one more bill that I get into in a second, is that this, due to updated revenue projections from the state and due to new federal money that came in because of the bipartisan infrastructure law, that the state has plenty of money to cover what's existing. And, they have funding to go forward. Our argument has been that federal money doesn't cover everything. We can't rely on federal money, and that's only a 5-year reauthorization. That's not going to be continuing. And federal money doesn't, help with things like, it might not help with maintenance, like with addressing potholes or transit operating. There's a lot of construction projects. You've heard no one, I don't know of anybody in Northern Virginia who said transportation is fixed. If you know, I have not heard of them. So even if some have said everything that isn't currently in the 6-year program would not be affected, there's still stuff that needs to be addressed that isn't in the current 6-year improvement program. So that's where that is. The other part, that the other revenue source, and it's a little bit further down in the budget section, has to do with the sales tax on groceries. Right now, there's the regular sales tax, which we pay when we buy a TV or, a soccer ball or whatever. There is a reduced rate when you buy groceries. I believe 2.5 cents or 2.5%. That there have been efforts this year to get rid of that, just eliminate it. And while that is a completely laudable goal, and my board has said it's a laudable goal, the impact on, number one, local revenues, because part of that 2.5% goes to localities to help address their needs, and part of it goes back again to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. We feel that if they're going to eliminate this revenue source, they have to find a way to make these, these fund where the money is going, to make it whole so that there isn't a reduction in revenues. That bill is also There was a version that passed the House, a version that passed the Senate. They're a bit different. They do somewhat, I believe one version does deal with some of the local revenue implications. Neither have dealt with the transportation implications. They've essentially said the transportation fund has plenty of money because of bipartisan infrastructure bill and revenue projections, and we can fix it in a couple of years, but we'll be good. That itself is supposed to have about what projections of 135 million a year reduction to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. So yeah, there's various efforts to reduce transportation funding that are still out in the legislative debate.
Well, if I could,
Sure.
and I know you don't have any insights, although you might have some, just wondering, I guess, the obvious observation with the assembly not in session, coming back sometime July 1st, I expect there's conversations going on, negotiations, all that. So really, there's no way to know what's going to happen. They'll come back, deal will be cut and announced, and we'll just see what happens with no time to really influence it at the last minute.
Once a deal is announced, there is a rule in the GA that says right now it's a 48-hour rule. They'll print the conference report, they'll have 48 hours to look at it, and then they'll vote on it. But once you see the conference report, it's a straight up or down vote. The governor will still have time to make amendments, but you have to figure that into the timeline of it needing to be enacted by July 1. The conference report, when it comes out, it's going to be just up or down as far as the General Assembly is concerned. And David and I have been around for a while. I remember before the 48-hour rule was in effect, when somebody would just come up and say, we have a budget, here's what's in it, let's vote on it in an hour. So at least with 48 hours, you can kind of see what's in it before the vote happens. So that is an improvement.
Yeah, this is David, and Noel gave a really good overview of all of the legislation. I think a couple things that I would provide as commentary. You know, first, you kind of have to read through the tea leaves and say that the House is yet to act on the governor's gas tax proposal, which indicates to me that there's very little interest in doing anything on that particular legislation. And notwithstanding the fact that the House hasn't acted, even if it were to pass, the Senate would inevitably kill that bill in committee. And so I think what you really come down to is any impact on the transportation fund will be narrowed to how the General Assembly addresses the grocery tax and what specifically they do with the money that is going to get taken out of the transportation fund. My gut is that they will hold localities harmless with the 1% or 1.5%, whatever it is. And the transportation fund is just going to take a bit of a haircut on that. It's a relatively small amount of money, but this grocery tax idea has been around for a very long time. Almost every member of the General Assembly, Republican and Democrat, has run on repealing the sales tax on food at one point or another. And so, and inflation sitting at 8.1%, most of that is being felt by consumer goods, either gas or food. So politically, there's great upside to getting rid of the sales and use tax. So I really don't foresee the conference report having much in it in the way of harming transportation funds, other than the repeal of the sales and use tax on food. And you know, that's just, there doesn't really seem to be a lot of appetite even amongst some Northern Virginian legislators to push back on the cut to the transportation fund.
Okay. Well, that all certainly makes sense. That's going to make sense. So appreciate that, David, and timely contribution. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Noel, you're muted again, or you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry.
No worries.
David and I have kind of talked over the budget. There was a lot more else in the budget, I will say, regarding transportation. There was some, it started last year and continued this year. are the state's version of earmarks, is what I will call it. Last year they had a transportation initiative, and they used some of the federal funding that was coming in via coronavirus funding, because a lot of that was coming in, and they directed it to various projects. There was funding, and to be completely honest, a lot of it came to help us. There was funding directed to VRE to address the Manassas line. There was funding for a project in the city of Falls Church. There was funding that was sent to the 154 that I mentioned earlier. That was going to come in under projections because one of the revenue sources was hotels. And as we all know, the hotel industry in our region has not been as, as strong as it was in previous years, especially over the past couple of years. So one of those directives was to use a certain amount of that money to make sure the state, number one, made its commitment, but also that us localities who are also having to pay our bill and we're also under our own financial strain would have some assistance. So I'm going to be completely honest. There was that transportation initiative. Northern Virginia did well last year. This year, they have both the Senate and the House had additions to those initiatives. And most of those, I will just say, I don't think any of the new projects were in Northern Virginia. There was some in Hampton Roads. There was some in Southwest. But Northern Virginia was not in this year's list of projects. They were in last year's. So I'm not going to go through all of those, but I did want to reference that. I'm going to try to find my transportation section, and I just lost it. Let me see if I can find it. It's after studies. I apologize. And I'm just going to go over various transportation safety bills that came up once I can scroll to it. I'm sorry, I believe I thought I had it. Let me do a quick search. There we go. Sorry, I just skipped over it. Okay, so transportation safety. There were a couple of bills related to transportation safety. Some that our board would have liked were not successful. Specifically, 2 years in 2021, the General Assembly passed a bill that authorized local governing bodies to reduce speed limits to less than 25 miles per hour, but more than 15 in business districts or residential districts. And I think our board was happy to have another tool in its toolbox to address some of our safety issues. However, VDOT then opined that it determined that another section of the Virginia Code said it didn't apply to roads in the state highway system, which is essentially all the roads in Fairfax County or in other counties except for Arlington and Henrico. So there was a bill that would have given us that authority that we thought we had last year. Unfortunately, that bill died. So we're still looking at ways to address that. But yes, that was one that that we were not happy to see go away.
Hey, Noel, can I ask
any speed limit
question?
or only below 20 miles an hour?
Okay, I'm good. So Kevin, so what that bill specifically did was there's a code section that it specifically would have let us reduce our speed limits to below 25. And what VDOT said is another code section said, so the code section that let us do this said if not in contravention of another section of the code, and another code section said the state picks the speed limits. I think there's a disagreement on whether or not if it's in conflict or if it could work together. But be that as it may, VDOT said that it determined the legislation did not apply to our streets.
But you can still reduce, like on Richmond Highway, from 45 to 40 if you want.
That is not necessarily the county that does that. That is VDOT.
Okay.
This would have given our boards, specifically our boards, that authority. And VDOT is part of that speed study right now going on Richmond Highway. The board can't unilaterally do that.
All right. So lowering any speed limit in Fairfax County is still under VDOT's authority.
According to this, that is my understanding. That is VDOT's opinion on that. That is my understanding of VDOT's opinion. I'll put it that way.
All right. Thank you for that.
And it looked like Jeremy had a question, and then it looks like Pete might have one after.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about this one because this one is particularly, I think, painful for me. I hadn't realized that VDOT had interpreted it this way. But so when this bill was going through the legislative process, I had raised with the county that this was a possible interpretation, and that I I had said that point, and I don't think it was in this format, but that I didn't think it was clear that the county was going to have authority because of this determination of what the state had authority over. I don't want to relitigate that, but I think it does bring up this bigger issue about how we're advocating around these issues. I know that, and maybe this was just I think I want to understand like how we're interpreting some of these laws. Does it go through a legal process? Is it just determined by staff about how we're determining it? I guess my question is like, why is there such a divergence between the interpretation of this from the county and the state?
I can't speak for our attorneys, but I will tell you what I told the board in a public setting. I believe some in the county attorney's office believe we have the authority. It is just not what VDOT believes. So how that gets dealt with, board has asked us to look into that. They actually asked me and they asked Tom about that just a week ago. So there are differing opinions.
Okay, that's helpful. I think the second piece that I'd like to better understand about, it raises kind of the larger question for me outside of this about how we prioritize what we're advocating for. I don't have a good understanding, and you can help me understand it. So the board sets priorities for staff to advocate in Richmond. And so there's I think a couple of proactive measures, and then largely it's defending. When these type of things come up, so say there was the interpretation on this one that it didn't apply to the county, would it be a board level decision to advocate for amendments to that, or is that still is staff permitted to work on those?
So our legislative program, the board adopted in December, because we found this out last fall, what VDOT's interpretation was it. So we let the board know there was language in the legislative program the board adopted saying we support efforts to fix it because we want the authority. There was a bill that would have done that. I physically got up and stood in front of committee saying we supported the measure, as did the Virginia Association of Counties. However, VDOT got up and they had concerns, and the subcommittee voted the bill down. So the board, there are bills that are initiatives which the board itself asked to be introduced and drafted. And we haven't, those were not related to transportation this year. There are other positions within the legislative program that kind of give the legislative staff their marching orders. Go support this, go oppose this. This was amongst those. And we knew, and we heard that the bill was being introduced.
Outside of this, so say you identify a bill and that it has a potential issue. So say we identified this, I hate to use this example because I don't want to harp on this particular issue, but say we identify an issue in the General Assembly, does that have to go back to the board to make it a priority to amend it, or is that at a staff level?
So the board itself meets almost every Friday during the General Assembly session. We have a legislative committee every Friday, or most Friday afternoons. Starts at 4:30 and goes until we're done. And those meetings can be anywhere from an hour to, I've been in them when they were 3.5, 4 hours long. Staff reviews bills. They provide recommendations that can be support, oppose, amend. And the board will give us their marching orders, whether or not they agree with those, or they will say, go try to make this better, or straight up oppose this. There's no way to fix, or support this. It's great. Or they give us direction every Friday, essentially. And we go back and work on it. So it's not like we're waiting weeks. We're waiting a couple of days.
Okay, so it's at the board level to make those decisions.
As far as official actions, yes, but we do work on things in the meantime. We talk with people, we find answers, we bring them history and language and what things are being considered.
This is more of a comment. Thank you, Noah, that's really helpful. And this is, I guess, more of a comment for the TAC as we think about advising the board. I think one of the areas that I noticed within this, not to get too far ahead, is that there's a priority section about maintaining local authority, expanding local authority. I think one of the areas that I recognized in this is that there's no reference to transportation. I think this is one of those elements that I think could have become a priority for the boards, in ensuring that there's that expansion. Maybe there's an issue of the interpretation here, but I think that there's an opportunity here to look at these transportation issues and ensuring that when there's opportunities to either expand our authority and to take control, or at least protecting that authority, that we're also thinking about, beyond land use and taxation, we're also looking at transportation.
So if I may, I believe our legislative program, which the board adopts, like I mentioned, it adopts every December. We did have a section in here, and I'm trying to find it. Give me 1 second. Adopted legislative program. We do have a section in the transportation area about addressing local needs.
Yeah, so the area I was looking at was the governance and local authority, which is on page 9. But transportation isn't one area that's covered under that.
No, so we don't have it in the local authority section, but we do have language in here talking about in the board's legislative program, not in this final report, but in the legislative program they adopt every December. We talk about increased coordination between localities in the Commonwealth and the process for considering speed limits and street standards, and that sort of thing. So we talk about the need to improve our streets, and that we fund sidewalks, that we address our Fairfax active transportation plan. So our transportation section does have a component related to transportation safety and coordination. It's not in local authority, but it is in the transportation section.
Okay. So my recommendation for the TAC that we should consider as a recommendation to the board is that we should look at transportation under local authority governance.
Hear you. Are you, Jeremy, I don't want to get into the discussion right now, but absolutely we can, and as we need to. And I think maybe our next conversation might be a good foundation for that conversation as well. But are you thinking about the county sort of taking ownership of the streets, or just taking ownership of our legislative strategy, so to speak?
It's a much bigger issue. I don't want to get into the street issue right now. I think my interest is ensuring that when these type of issues come up, that it's also that local authority and maintaining that local authority. We're thinking about these transportation issues, and perhaps it's covered in any ways. It just struck me that this kind of local governance, and we do have some authority around sidewalks and other issues. So the extent that we can look for the opportunities, that we're identifying areas where there's an opportunity for more local authority in this space, that we're ensuring that there's clarity in the laws. And so that when there's issues of interpretation, that we're ensuring clarity in the statute, I guess is my point.
Or perhaps injecting clarity where there might not otherwise be some.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's some discrepancy as to some disagreement as to what it is or is not. And yes, I know you're not harping on this, but we have an example of a disagreement between VDOT and ourselves about, the local authority on the speed limits. So
yeah, and I'll just say, Nicole, or Noel, I recognize you have lots and lots and lots of issues that you're managing, and this is just one of them. So I don't want to suggest that I think I appreciate that you advocating and that you took it to the board. But I'm thinking more in terms of what we're recommending for the board's priorities, and ensuring that these type of issues get the clarity that they need.
Yeah, what quick observation again, Jeremy, I know you'll raise this again at appropriate times and things like that, but certainly as we're looking to move forward on various issues, active transportation, et cetera, and Jeremy, this could very well be what you're thinking of, or there's another shade of it. If there's a piece of what we believe the solution is to have more local authority and whatever the issue is working on, that could be one opportunity to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And not that we aren't looking more globally, but we can also be targeted as well. But certainly, I definitely agree that we want to be looking at things the county could do, and perhaps giving the county some more authorities that allow us to do some things we want to do. That's an understandable and expected recurring theme.
Yep. Thanks.
So I have one last bill, but I wasn't sure if Pete had a question. He was on the screen and then he wasn't.
Yes.
I was ready in case we went down the Richmond Highway conversation more, but we didn't, so all good.
So the last bill I want to mention, and it has been an issue for some here in the county, has to deal with exhaust noise. It's come up a lot in the past couple of years. So in 2020, as part of the criminal justice reform package, a lot of traffic infractions were reduced from primary offenses to secondary offenses, which essentially means as a primary, if somebody saw my car and it was doing something that was a primary offense, a police officer could pull me over and I could receive a ticket for that infraction. As a secondary, they could only give me a ticket for that infraction if they witnessed me doing something else that was a primary. So let's say, and well, in this case, I'll use exhaust noise. There was a code section that said exhaust systems had to be in good working order. So if there was a vehicle with an extremely loud exhaust, which was proof that it wasn't in good working order, a police officer could ticket that vehicle for that reason. When it became a secondary, they'd have to have another primary offense to pull them over before providing the ticket on the exhaust noise issue. So what that is resulted in Northern Virginia, I'm aware of, as well as a big issue in Richmond based on what was heard in committee, a lot more cars with a lot more loud exhaust making a lot more noise on our roads. So there were efforts this year, a lot of time, a lot of discussion on how to address this. There were ways on, there were thoughts on how about local noise ordinances? What about putting stuff in your annual safety inspection? Various things. How do you measure it with, because there's noise measurements, but then what happens with all of this, that, and the other. So there were extensive discussions. The General Assembly did end up passing a bill. It was offered by Delegate Carr. She is from Richmond. And what it did at the end of the day was two things. Number one, it did return the muffler in good working order back to a primary offense. And it also made some changes to some code provisions related to local noise ordinances. So that, after lots of discussion, and I know this has been an issue in several communities. I know there's a very loud vehicle in my community that loves to just rev their engine late at night. This now will return to being a primary offense, which means if there is a car that is obviously in violation, a police officer can ticket them for this offense as a primary offense.
The postscript to that, unfortunately, that the news is not quite that good in the practical sense, in that a meeting that I just came off of before this one was the Fairfax County police officer pointed out the staffing shortage. So these, unfortunately, and believe me, where I live, right at the intersection of Burke Center Parkway and Roberts, they were all too frequent occurrence. But because of the staffing shortages on our wonderful police department right now, don't look for immediate improvement in enforcement on that. I think it's going to take some time until they can get staffed back up.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Somebody was asking a question.
Just when they're talking about good working order, the expectation there, the assumption seems to be that the only loud muffler is one that's not working, but some of these are designed to be very loud, and I think you were alluding to that. So does that sort of defeat the purpose? Because if it's in good working order, it's just loud, it would seem that they're okay?
I think I can't remember what the exact definition is, but a lot of these are changed after the fact and they're modified. Okay. And they're not muffling, which is the whole point of a muffler. So how that is in good working order, that I think is a question. And I believe police departments have some history and knowledge on how to address this.
Okay. Okay, appreciate it.
So I think that might be it as far as transportation. Just a quick heads up for people. You might be seeing more vehicles that have red and white flashy secondary lights on our roads. After a couple of years of discussion, a bill passed that allows traffic incident management vehicles, which are those ones that help with incidents but aren't your police, aren't your fire, to be equipped with flashing red or red and white secondary lights. They cannot avoid traffic laws. Like right now, if we all know, if there's a police officer or a fire vehicle and they have their lights on, they can slowly, but they can go through a red, they can go around vehicles. Traffic incident management cannot do that, but they can now use flashing red and white lights, secondary lights, and they have to be properly trained to do so. So that is something to be aware of that will go into effect in the next year, and we have some of those up here in Northern Virginia, so just be aware.
Are they independent vendors, or who utilizes those secondary lights?
A lot of them are, they're either state employees by VDOT or contracted, and or they're also on the express lanes. And I think the express lanes, because they are private vendors, might have their own traffic incident management vehicles. But they're not just anybody. They are contracted to be doing that specific purpose on the interstates, on the express lanes, or on those roads that they're directed to be out by either the express lane companies or the Commonwealth.
But not for tow trucks then either, right?
I do not believe tow trucks. It lists traffic incident management vehicles specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
So that's the legislative update. Like I said, we're still waiting for the next couple of weeks to see how things finalize. And we're hoping to have a budget soon. So if that is it with legislation, I can go on to the general transportation funding in Fairfax County.
Sure.
One quick thing on David's earlier point that he may be raising, or I'm sorry, Jeremy's with the board. If you don't have to weigh in now, Nicole, but if you have any, contribution to that to make sure that it's focused in the most productive, or what we would hope to be the most productive way, that I hope you would, let the chair know.
It's something I know that has come up. You all have mentioned, I've heard others, and I will talk with Tom and we can circle back with the chair.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to unshare this.
Okay.
And then try to share. Sorry, my mouse is being finicky. I'm going to try to share my PowerPoint, which you all should have also received.
There we go.
Okay, let me.
By the way, Noel, this is Eric. Just wanted to say thank you very much for the legislative summary. That was excellent.
Sure.
Absolutely. Very good.
And for those who are wondering about the deep voice, it's a genetic modification from COVID.
No comment.
So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm just going to go over a general funding in Fairfax County presentation. Some of you might have seen this before. I think Tom offered it to the West Falls Church group just a couple of weeks ago. But essentially, I'm just going to go over the background, some transportation funding programs and sources, current changes in the funding situation, transportation project priorities, and then see if there are any questions at the end. So here's the background. Prior to 1932, Virginia counties maintained their own secondary roads. However, during the Great Depression, all counties struggled with road maintenance. So in 1932, the General Assembly passed the Byrd Act, and it provided uniform maintenance on roads across Virginia and eased the financial burden on localities. Since then, VDOT has been responsible for secondary road maintenance and construction on all of the state's counties' roads except for Arlington and Henrico. They opted out from the beginning. Cities and towns with a population over 3,500 also maintain their own urban streets, and they receive state aid from the Commonwealth to do that. So for Fairfax County, that includes Herndon and Vienna. And they have their own transportation departments. They do maintain their own roads. Clifton is below that population amount, so they do not. And then since the 1980s, the county has been supplementing the transportation construction funding available from VDOT to advance projects, including bicycle and pedestrian projects. And we've all talked in the past about the funding the county itself has provided for transportation funding. Continuing on, funding for transportation projects. And just to let you all know, my screen has been taken over by this entire slide program, so I can't see any faces. So if you have a question, just call out because I can't see you.
Copy.
Funding for transportation projects. Different strategies are used for capital projects and transit operations. It's rare you will ever find one project that has one funding source. It's a mix of federal, state, local, private. That's what is needed. Our projects are big. They need multiple funding sources to get completed. And they often have to be included in various plans and programs related to those funding sources. So I'll just go into a couple of those now. I'm not going to talk about all of these, so don't worry, but essentially at the local level, we have the county budget, we have the capital improvement program, and our transportation priorities plan. And here are all the various local revenues that may help provide transportation funding, everything from the general fund to bonds to, we have tax districts such as Route 28, Dulles Rail Phases 1 and 2. We have service districts. We have Northern Virginia Transportation 30% funds. Each of these might have their individual requirements or may not, but those are all the types of funds some of the funds we currently have locally. At the regional level, we have, as far as regional planning, programming and revenue sources, we have the Transportation Planning Board. What it does is it has the Transportation Improvement Program. That's the 6-year program for obligating federal funds to state and local projects. NVTA has its 6-year program, and those are projects funded by NVTA 70%. So when I mentioned a bit ago the diversion of funding from regional money, a lot of that would have been an NVTA 6-year program. So that is essentially, right now they have about 200 or 300 million a year that they get in regional revenue funds that they fund projects through. And that is regional sales tax, the grantor's tax, the truck usage fee I mentioned a while ago, and an annual fund transfer from the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. NVTA 6-year program, it's based on quantitative and qualitative analysis, including stuff like congestion mitigation relative to cost. In fact, it's required to give priority to projects expected to provide the greatest congestion reduction relative to cost of the project. And that's in the state code. The code also specifies that each locality's long-term benefit must be approximately equal to the proportion of the total of the fees and taxes collected by that locality. So for instance, it's not dollar in, dollar out. If Fairfax County put in, if there's $100, Fairfax County put in 42 cents, we're going to get 42 cents back in projects. It's not going to be dollar in, dollar out. But what it does say is over about a 10-year, they look back every 10 or so years. If we provided about 40, I think it probably is about 43% of the revenues, we should get about 43% of the benefit. That's partially where the project is located and partially the usage, because there are some projects, and there was one project, I'll use an example, NVTA was thinking of funding it a couple of years ago. It got funded through another mechanism. But for instance, the I-66 Route 28 interchange, if NVTA had funded that, we would have received the benefit on the fact that it's located partially in the county, so we would have been credited that benefit there. However, they also would have done modeling and said, okay, of this interchange, we'll say, and I'm just picking numbers, it's a ballpark, we'll say 40% are Fairfax County residents, 30% are Prince William, and 20% are Loudoun, and 10% are other. So when they're factoring long-term benefit, they would take that into account as well. There are also tolls and concession agreements, such as commuter choice, I-66 inside the Beltway, and I-95 and 395 commuter choice programs. Those are handled by Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. There is going to be the Northern Extension for I-495. That will also have some concession funding available. And those funds go to projects that are benefit the toll road users. So that's transit service, that's roads, that's pedestrian projects. but they have to benefit the users. So we have used some of those to fund service. For instance, we have a route that goes from the Stringfellow Park and Ride lots all down to downtown, or one that goes from Vienna to another section downtown. Those physically use 66. You get people out of their cars. It helps the other toll users, and it gets them downtown as well. So it's those sort of projects, or that will get you to the metro station. We've applied for funding for the part of the I-66 trail near Vienna. That will get people to the metro station and on the metro, and it will help the toll payers in that way. So those are some of those types of projects. Those are approved by NVTA or NVTC and the Commonwealth Transportation Board. The NVTA and NVTC makes the recommendations, but the CTB makes the final approval. And then we have the regional gas tax. For decades, we've had a 2.1%, or they've changed the percentages a bit when they changed how they calculated it. But we've had a extra gas tax in place for decades, and that is used to fund localities' share of metro operating. The county gets its gas tax. We use it to send to metro to pay our, our quarterly metro bill. Before I continue, does anybody have any questions?
Just quickly, the towns that are above 3,500, which towns in Fairfax County are those?
So there's 5 towns in Northern Virginia. 2 of them are in Fairfax. We have Herndon and Vienna, and then the other 3 are Leesburg, Dumfries, and Purcellville, and those are in Loudoun and Prince William.
Which were the 2 from Fairfax? Sorry, Noel.
Herndon and Vienna.
Herndon and Vienna.
And just to add on this is the just to clarify my concern about the previous topic. This is the issue. I mean, because we also have Falls Church City, which isn't in Fairfax, but we have Arlington County. And the issue, and this is the issue, this divergence between localities and what the county can do is really challenging to communities. We have, for example, around my neighborhood, we have Shreve Road. It's 35 miles an hour. There are 2 WNOD crossings. There's an elementary school, and there's 1 crossing for a 2-mile stretch. Versus 1 street over is West Street. It's in Falls Church City. Shreve is 35. West Street is 25 miles an hour, has speed humps, has crossings, has stop signs all along the street. Guess where cars go? They go to Shreve Road, and they go 45 miles an hour, which is really a residential area. And so my larger concern with this, and what I think we should prioritize within the legislature, is and reducing the divergence in the county's ability to manage these traffic flows.
Say that again, Jeremy. I'm trying to digest that.
Divergence in the counties. So Falls Church City, Vienna could, under this law, I guess, could make it 15, 20 miles an hour. And you could have a street, 1 street over that's in Fairfax County that's 35, 40 miles an hour. And so it pushes the traffic, unsafely into Fairfax County, where we just don't have the pedestrian infrastructure to be able to handle it. And so we have localities around the county, our neighbors, that have very safe streets that are reducing it and that result in traffic being pushed onto county roads, where we don't have really any ability to manage the traffic flows and to make them safer.
I will say that I was told many years ago that judges in traffic court do not look favorably on speed limits that change, 1 mile down the road they're this, and then a mile later they go up. But I'm not sure that helps you out too much, because one's set by Falls Church and another set by VDOT. It's not an easy issue. But Nicole, if I just also ask in that last, so in Vienna, Vienna maintains, they do the snow plowing and their own snow plowing?
They are tasked with maintaining their own urban roads. I can't speak to every single road. I think there are some primaries in there. I don't know the specifics about how primary roads are handled. Unfortunately, that's not my area of expertise. But yes, Vienna and Herndon are tasked with maintaining the roads, the urban roads within the towns.
Okay, but I guess 123 would be the main drag through Vienna, or one of them. that would probably still be VDOT then.
I would have to double check and get back to you on that one. I don't remember the specifics.
All right, it's just a kind of a trivia, but all right, thank you.
I can't speak for Vienna, but the town of Herndon, yes, does handle their own roads and the snow plows and all of that. So yes.
And what a bang up job they do, if I might add.
So continuing on to statewide programming and funding. That is the 6-year improvement program. The state updates its SIP every year, and it funds projects for the most part for the next 6 years. So right now their comment period is open for the I think 22 to 27, no, that's MBTA's, 23 to 28 6-year improvement program. So the state and that the Commonwealth Transportation Board approves every June. Here, I'm not going to list all of their funds because they have a whole lot of them, as we've talked about some earlier today, but you see all these various transportation funds. They go into the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, and then they're split into construction and maintenance and transit and rail, and then they're subdivided beyond that. So construction, you have things like Smart Scale, which we've talked about in the past. They have state of good repair. They have revenue sharing. Then there's the transit component where they have capital and operating and various programs. So all of that makes its way into the Commonwealth 6-year improvement program. And then at the federal level, we have, and these are handled in different ways, but essentially there are various federal programs. We have discretionary grants. These USDOT or one of their agencies has application periods, and entities, localities, the state, metropolitan planning organizations, they submit applications directly to the federal government. And we've submitted applications for things like the Richmond Highway BRT or Fairfax County Parkway. I think one of our recent applications for one of these programs was bicycle and pedestrian improvements over on Sunrise Valley Drive near between Innovation and the Fairfax County Parkway. So these are discretionary grants that the USDOT makes awards to, and they each have their own requirements. They're targeted in various ways. There are earmarks now. So now each spring, our federal delegation, as every federal delegation in the Commonwealth, has information out there, and localities can try to grab earmarks for some of their projects. They're usually smaller. Last year, we submitted various earmark requests to the county did to our delegation. And then as far as transportation, we were approved for 2 that we submitted here in Fairfax County. Sidewalk on Pohick Road down in the Mount Vernon district near Route 1, as well as some funding for capital bike share in underserved areas. So these are usually in the $1 to $4 million range. We're not talking the huge projects, but that helps with various projects within the Commonwealth, within the county, definitely. There's defense access roads that can be used near military facilities. We have a lot of those, or we have some of those. Transportation alternative set-asides. That includes bicycle and pedestrian projects, safe routes to schools, boulevards, recreational trails. These are smaller projects. Portions are allocated by the Commonwealth Transportation Board and the Regional Transportation Planning Board. I will say we are recommended to receive some safe routes to schools projects funding, including a couple in the county. So we're hopeful that they are currently in the draft program and should be adopted now in June. Formula grants. A lot of this funding flows to the Commonwealth and then they allocate. And then some of that is transit funding. That being said, Fairfax Connector does not currently receive federal transit funds. So some federal transit funding might flow to Metro or to VRE, but the connector itself is not federalized. And then we have Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality and Regional Surface Transportation Program. NVTA makes those recommendations on what should be funded. And those are a combination of smaller projects and bigger ones. We've received funding for projects throughout the county from that. Richmond Highway, the widening and the BRT. We have some of this federal money on Soapstone up in Reston, some money on the Parkway. We're recommended to put some money on Seven Corners to continue on with some of that planning effort. A lot of projects around the county are funded by some of these sources. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions on state or federal funding?
Anything?
Okay,
Sounds
hearing
good.
none.
Thank you. Mark.
Sure. Does somebody have a question?
Not really, but I must admit that when you start peeling this back and seeing so many levels of funding and not funding, it's eye-opening. So thank you.
I have a perfect slide to explain it towards the end that I'm actually quite proud of. So current changes in funding. You all have heard about the federal bill. So it's the official title is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's also referred to as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So you might hear references to the IIJI or the BIL. It's the same bill, but it's the federal reauthorization that was passed back in November. And that has a whole load of additional money as well as new programs. We're continuing to receive information on some of those new availabilities, not daily, but frequently. Like I said, either some programs, some discretionary grants had more money, or there's new discretionary programs out there that we're looking into. So there's that. There's a state we just talked about. We already talked about this, so I'm not going to rehash that. But we have the state gas taxes and the grocery tax, and then at the local level, the board has asked us to direct $100 million for pedestrian and bicycle safety projects. The first $5 million was approved in January, and county staff is preparing recommendations for the board consideration. I believe the TAC had requested some information on this. We're looking to bring something back to you in the upcoming months. Okay, so you've seen all the sources. Now the question is, how do we decide if projects get funded? And that's through the county's transportation priorities plan. The board adopted their first plan in 2014, and then they updated the plan in 2019. The 2014 bill, the 2014 plan had extensive public analysis, and after that, the board approved about 1.4 billion worth of projects, and this essentially directs staff which projects should be funded. We have a whole list of everything from small little missing links and sidewalks to the Richmond Highway BRT, which is much bigger than than that. And so it's projects that we expect to have funded that with the funding we reasonably expect to receive. Like I mentioned, the initial one was passed in 2014 or approved in 2014. In December 2019, the board approved an updated TPP. And that included projects that were going to continue from the original TPP, as well as some projects that actually had to be deferred due to that diversion that we mentioned earlier. And that also includes projects through various sources. And here you see some of the things that we consider, some of the plans that are out there. So what did we do? We looked at all the projects that, I'm not going to say all because there are many projects in the county, but county staff and others reviewed projects that were in the county. They were evaluated based on factors. There was congestion reduction, safety, travel time savings, air quality, access to transit centers, whether or not they went along with the One Fairfax policy, regional considerations, whether or not they were in required plans. So all of these were used to decide, to scale down the much larger list of projects to the 200, 300 that were in the TPP.
Well,
and so,
Noel, the asterisks for, it looks like the three items. What are the asterisks?
Yes. Sorry, I lost that that footnote. I apologize. We actually have a benefit cost analysis tool, and those were some that went into the specific BCA tool.
Okay.
Where some of these are very qualitative, or can be modeled, or more qualitative. Other ones are more quantitative, while others are more qualitative. You can't really put a number to countywide balance. It's something you look at the package to make sure there's a countywide balance, that sort of thing.
Copy. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
but if I could, just a quick observation on the travel time savings. I'll mention Pete in particular because we've talked about this with Rachel, but she's mentioned it here in the TAC as well. Just sort of the road flow criteria and things like that. I don't want to get too much into it here, but that could be something that rears its head in this context as well.
Got you. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to tell you how they're modeled, how they're evaluated. That's somebody else that is much smarter than I am. I just can tell you that all of these are considered when preparing the transportation priorities plan.
If I could, Pete, you got your hand up?
I do. Something became clearly aware to me just recently on the widening of Richmond Highway, where we just went through a lane analysis. Basically, it was excessive lane analysis for the turn lanes. And they had the same sort of criteria that's on here, but one thing really missing from it, in my opinion, was making place. I just don't see it on the VDOT checklist, and I'd really love at some point to see it on the Fairfax County checklist. That makes a difference.
Well, and I think you can kind of see that in some of these. It might not be one of those with the asterisks, but it's something we can consider. You look at economic development support for revitalization. You look at one Fairfax, and I do think that that is part of the story. Healthy communities, so we access to schools and parks. So we do look at that. Different components of that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you don't, but I just kind of like earlier discussions on other matters this evening. Knowing me, I would like to see it. That's all. But thank you.
Well, certainly, quick observation. I mean, obvious, just the procedural observation. That the TAC obviously is perfectly within our expectations to make suggestions, recommendations to the Board of Supervisors for adjusting various criterias and measurements and things like that. So Pete, right to your point, exactly. I'm sure they would welcome our opinions, assessments, maybe as recommendations about making place and bringing some of those other things into these criteria as we go forward.
What was the criteria, Pete, that you wanted to add?
Basically, incorporating urban street design and making place that in the appropriate areas is not. Not every road should be a place, but at the same time, wherever there's an opportunity to make place by using urban street design, I would like to see that on checklists. On Richmond Highway, if that criteria was on there, frankly, would have, from my perspective, a smaller but better road. And so I'm just looking for one more checklist item.
I hadn't heard
that.
But
I agree with you, Noel, that there's somewhat in here, but I just like more of a laser point to it.
I had not heard that term, making place. That's what you call it?
Yes, it's making place. Basically, Richmond Highway has been a drive-through since the beginning. But what we've been trying to do along Richmond Highway, that's Mountain Run and Lee districts, is make it a destination, someplace that people want to go to, not just travel through, but actually shop there, live there. And I think that would, by doing that, of course, we can talk a long time on it this evening, but basically, if you make it a place, people live there, they'll drive that half mile to work, or they'll walk that half mile to work instead of congesting the roads. So it kind of helps with congestion reduction.
I'm aware of we've talked about that at length. I just hadn't heard that term. So
there you go. Yeah, but it's making place. Thank you.
And then, so we've talked about various transportation revenue sources. We've talked about the projects. And at the end of the day, this is kind of what we do. We look at all the projects, we look at all the sources and try to match them up to get our complete transportation program moving. Yes, that is a mess. And that is kind of the point. You'll see not one of these lines just goes to one of the sources. They go to not every single source, because some of these might not fit with every single source, but a lot of them do. So county staff looks at the projects that the board has approved as part of the TPP, looks at the available sources and tries to mix and match so we get a complete project and a complete Fairfax County transportation program.
I like that middle one because that's how my mind feels after your presentation, as good as it was. I know how many years did it take you to kind of get comfortable with all of these sources?
We're still getting comfortable with them because, as I mentioned, the IIJA just created a bunch of new ones. So we're learning the new rules with the new bill, and every single time the federal government reauthorizes a program, That's every 5-ish years. They make changes, or the state changes its program funding sources. They made a major underhaul in 2020. They had one in 2013. So we can't get too comfortable because somebody will always have a thought on how to change things.
I think you should change the graph to a roulette table.
And with that, that is my final slide, just to see if there are any further questions. I'm going to exit out of here just so that I can see you all again. But that is the summary of transportation funding in Fairfax County.
Appreciate it very much.
Well done.
Go ahead. We have commissioners who have questions. Kevin?
Already asked mine.
Okay. Eric's got a, Kevin, do you want to go? Eric, you said, okay. Okay.
That's still spinning, but an excellent job. And, you know, we look forward to having you back every year on it. So
Definitely.
Here, here.
Maybe just quickly, if you may be planning to do this, but after they finally do get the budget out in July, if maybe you would shoot us a quick summary of anything that changed or what they finally got done.
Sure, we can share. We usually put together a summary when the session ends, whenever that might be. So I'll be happy to pass along a quick summary to the TAC.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, appreciate it.
I see Roger has his hand up. I'm not sure if that was for me.
Oh, that's right. Well, can you hear me? I've had technical problems. I want to make sure it's okay. A few years ago, the Virginia State Supreme Court handed down a decision that kind of invalidated one of these regional organizations that we were trying to put together, saying that you could not delegate taxing authority to non-elected officials. How do our regional authorities work in light of that? Do we still have their combinations of people? But explain that structure if you could, please.
So what happened there was in 2007, the General Assembly passed HB 3202. And that created regional revenues, or it created a mechanism for regional revenues for NVTA. And it essentially gave NVTA the authority to enact various taxes and fees. I think 7 or 8, I can't remember the exact number. I apologize, that was pre-me. The Supreme Court noted, as you said, that while most of the members of NVTA are elected, they were not elected by the region, that they could not impose those taxes. So those revenue sources went away. So how the General Assembly addressed that in 2313, in the year 2013 through HB 2313, is they themselves enacted the revenue sources, and then they direct the money to NVTA, and NVTA just allocates the money. So the regional sales tax, the regional grantors tax, this truck user fee, and the other ones that we show, and if I can scroll back 1 second, let me come back here. Okay, I'm going to share briefly. Okay, so if you see here under NVTA, the regional sales tax, the grantor's tax, the regional share of the Interstate Operations Enhancement Program, and the annual transfer from the Transportation Fund. NVTA receives those funds from the Commonwealth. However, they themselves did not have to vote to enact them. The General Assembly themselves enacted them, and then they direct them to go to NVTA. So NVTA is not itself.
That was how they got around that ruling.
Yes.
But because they're elected, of course, we think. Are there other regions within the state that have this same situation, or is Northern Virginia unique? So is there something down in the boot heel or something like that, or they get
so we were one of the first that had regional revenues, us in Hampton Roads. And after the 2007 bill went away, we lost our revenue sources, but in 2013 we regained, or we gained these new revenue sources, or some of them. At the same time, Hampton Roads itself also had regional revenues enacted, and theirs are limited to bridges, tunnels, and highways. We have more flexibility. We actually have a lot more requirements on the processes that we have to go through for the program, but Hampton Roads has theirs that they spend on bridges, tunnels, and highways, and they're using those for some of those big tunnel projects and, you know, bridge projects down in Hampton Roads. So we both got regional revenues in 2013. Both of us got the elevated sales tax. So for the rest of the state, if you go buy a TV and it changes, but let's say you go if you went and bought a TV in Lynchburg, you pay 5.3%. in sales tax. You buy a TV in Fairfax, you pay 6%. And that 0.7 comes to MVTA and helps us build our roads. So us and Hampton Roads got them first. And then what was the next group? I-81, then there were some, as part of this new interstate operations and enhancement program, planning districts along I-81 got some additional gas tax and some fees to make improvements to the I-81 corridor. And then, let me see, and then Central Virginia. So the Richmond area recently got their regional revenue fund sources. And unfortunately, I can't remember what their sources are, but they have money that goes to their regional projects and to their regional transit agency. Hampton Roads got a little bit more for their transit agency recently. And then the state set up a program where so now Richmond, I-81, Hampton Roads, and Nova all have an elevated gas tax that goes to specific priorities. The General Assembly passed a bill a couple of years ago that said everybody who wasn't one of those now also has the same elevated gas tax. And that elevation only goes to projects in those areas, but that is allocated by the state. So let's say I'm just gonna, a locality in the Northern Neck might not be covered by one of these entities. They have that higher gas tax now, or now it's all the same across the Commonwealth, but that bump up, that money has to go to the projects in the Northern Neck region, but the Commonwealth Transportation Board allocates it. Okay. So it's been compartmentalized, and then there's been additional things to kind of put some posture similar, but it's different around the Commonwealth.
My goodness. What would we do without you? The other question I have is, I know that the state raised the gasoline tax over a period of about 3 years. I think it was a nickel a gallon. Maybe it started about 4 years ago, whatever. Is that money go to these regional authorities, or is that part of the general fund, or is part of it yes and part of it no?
That 10-cent increase, it was 5 cents in 2020 and 5 cents in 2021. That goes to the Commonwealth Transportation Fund. So that's used for statewide maintenance, statewide construction, transit, airports, rail, everything that can be. It's part of the giant, it's part of this circle here.
Look at that. Okay. So that's what got the asphalt trucks moving.
That has helped, that helped. And what happened there is there was a study, and as we all know, cars are more fuel efficient these days. So revenue was not keeping up with the needs, because your car, even if it's the same identical car you bought it 10 years ago and today, we can guarantee you're getting much better gas mileage today. So that's kind of, that gas tax increase was added to help address that issue.
At the risk of being a little blue sky here, has the legislature at all considered what's going to happen as we have more EVs on the road? I know they tried a fee a few years ago and then repealed it. Any thought, or are they still chasing their tail about that? Because I don't know if there's a simple solution to that problem.
There's part of that was addressed partially in 2020 as well. Part of this omnibus transportation bill that included the gas tax increase, it put in place some pilots to look at user fees that they're evaluating right now. I know some various states, it's not a statewide mandate at the moment, but they're looking at ways to look at user fees. They also did put into place a I'm not going to remember the term, but essentially a fuel efficient fee. So when you register your car, you might see a fee that if your car is above a certain fuel efficiency, you might have to pay an additional fee, and that is to address
I see.
the fact that you're paying less than you would have if you had, to help make up for the difference.
So in other words, I'm punished for buying an efficient car, but I can buy a gas guzzler in it. Not that they make very many of them anymore, but yeah.
And there is
More of an
a
offset.
break there. Like they're trying not to make you pay the full amount. You do get a certain, like if you would have paid $100, they're going to make you pay about 80, 85. So they're trying to help you with that break, but it still help have you contribute to the transportation needs.
I don't think Virginia is the only state that's in this boat, but as the gasoline tax becomes less and less useful, there have to be some other funding sources, but
That's true. That's true.
we're going to have
If
to.
anybody, any state put in one option they might have been looking at, the miles driven?
I think Oregon's maybe Oregon, one of those Pacific Northwest states, is experimenting with a pilot program on that. I think it's Oregon, maybe it's Washington, but one of those.
And that pilot, there is the 2020 bill included language to create a pilot in Virginia to look into that.
Okay.
Because I think it's something everybody's trying to figure out how to address right now.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks, Roger, Kevin, again, appreciate it. Are there any other questions there? A lot of sources, very complex, obviously putting it together, Rubik's Cube for each, whatever analogy you want to use, trying to put the pieces together there. So very, very instructive. And again, Noel, appreciate you being with us for the back-to-back presentations. Again, any last questions from any of the commissioners before we let Noel get back to her life, although you're welcome to stay if you'd like as we go forward. Any last questions from anybody?
I guess you don't plan your Friday nights during a legislative session, huh? With the board's meeting every Friday night.
I live in Richmond Sunday through Friday, come home, meet with the board, and spend my Saturday getting ready to go back down on Sunday. That's just the life I lead during the session.
No envy there.
Yes.
Well, thank you for your service. I mean, I know you've been doing this job for a number of years and you're irreplaceable. I don't think we can get anybody to do what you're doing.
Very true. Very true.
And you can feel free to cut out this part of the recording and send it to Tom when it's time for your evaluation.
Well, thank you all, and I'll be sure to send an update when we have a final budget in the upcoming weeks. Have a good evening.
Well,
Thanks.
thanks.
Thank you, Noel.
Good evening. Okay. All right. Next topic of the agenda is public comment period. If there are any members of the public here who would like to comment, please speak up now. Hearing none, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is our agenda for the next meeting. We actually have a pretty well developed concept for the next meeting. We had discussed this, I know, at our last meeting, and looking forward to discussions on the West Falls Church Active Transportation Plan. That is on the calendar right now for June. And then also another very nice pairing, as it were, active transportation capital project prioritization methodology. Chris Wells, Lauren Del Mar, and Nicole Winans are available to come back and visit us again. So I do want to talk about this. I think it fits with very much, the conversation we had the last meeting. Jeremy would very much look forward to any observations you would like to make. We'll say, though, that I think that this is an excellent opportunity for us to get back in the active transportation discussions. I remember just last year, can't remember exactly when last year, we had 2 or 3 meetings in a row, or 3 out of 4 meetings on active transportation issues, working very diligently on it there. We said we'd get back to the issue, and I think now would be a good time there. So I would like to have a little bit of a conversation about active transportation in general, just sort of placing it in context. But with that, would like to open some discussion about how June 21st looks. And Jeremy, if you don't mind, I'll call on you first to just tell us what you think about the West Falls Church activity there.
Yeah, I think it's a good opportunity for the TAC to hear how the county is approaching some of these issues. And so this was driven by the comprehensive plan related to the West Falls Church Metro. It's being redeveloped right now, and it's a mix of residential and commercial space and connecting it. One of the challenges that has come out of that, like all areas, is that transportation, like pedestrian and bicycle access, is very difficult, and it's certainly a priority around metro stations. I think what you'll hear the county is, I think it's a good process for the county to go through. There's actually a community meeting tonight. There's another one on Thursday. So I think it'll be good for the TAC to hear how the county is approaching these type of issues. The study is going to lead to a report that comes out. And then, of course, the challenge is we have a lot of recommendations, but no real way to fund them. But it's a good process and a good community, a way for the community to weigh in on these issues. And then I guess Huntington is going through a similar process. And so we thought it would be good to just go ahead and combine both of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the capital project prioritization methodology, as I say, a good match there for the conversation. When we were discussing before our active Fairfax activities, there's a number of related factors there, and Commissioner Glenn, Commissioner Westenhoff remember very well your important contributions last year as we're moving forward on those issues there. Pedestrian bike safety, we've talked a bit about that. What I'd like to do is try and bring a few things together if we could. The bike network, the funding and things like that. I'll admit I'm looking a little bit at the work plan now, but the work plan is designed to sort of help us focus our thoughts a little bit there. So was going to ask Kelly and Alexis if you've got any observations or thoughts, just raw thoughts as we're talking about here about sort of the active Fairfax plan, some of the other activities we've been talking about. In terms of maybe a way to bring those in, or just maybe keep them in mind as we're having that conversation next month.
As far as Active Fairfax is concerned, the next step is there's some working groups being formed at the moment. I'm aware of this because the Fairfax Alliance for Better Bicycling was invited to participate. So they're going to be looking at things like policy implementation, some other aspects of the Active Fairfax process of moving it along. So it's moving slowly, but it's moving along.
And this can obviously be another input, another factor perhaps as we go forward. So do you know, by the way, just wondering what the pace of setting these working groups out, how fast they plan to set up these working groups? Are they set up already, or they're talking about doing it? Can you?
The meetings aren't set yet, but they are reaching out to stakeholders from various groups to look at schedules and cadence. And some groups are meeting a few times a month, some are meeting once a quarter. It kind of just depends on the group. I think there's 5 or 6 groups. Okay. Looking at various aspects of things. So, an update from Nicole or Chris or others on sort of, maybe what these groups, what they hope to achieve or what they expect, or I don't know.
Okay.
Something along those lines might be appropriate for the TAC.
Appreciate that.
The board just passed something on Active Fairfax. Didn't I see a memo or a newsletter from Jeff McKay that they'd taken action on Active Fairfax? Maybe not.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
This is still Noel.
Hello, you're still here. Good.
Well, you made your escape.
No, I'm still here. The board endorsed the Safe Streets for All program on Tuesday. and including the initial task recommendation. So I'm thinking that's probably what you heard about. That is
Okay.
something Chris can probably tell you more about next month, but that is the action you're probably referring to.
Okay, right. I'm sure it is. Thank you.
That certainly makes sense. That certainly makes sense. You know, I think the we have the various elements there, and so I encourage a you know, taking advantage of the opportunity, particularly as Noel just pointed out. You know, we've got Chris and Lauren and Nicole with us. It will be a chance to sort of take their temperature a little bit, so to speak, on some of the active Fairfax activities. I don't want to divert too much away, but obviously they're all related. And the reason I'm getting into this much detail is one, I did want to sort of pull some thoughts together in terms of tying a bit to our work plan and considering possible recommendations and things like that. Just making sure we're mindful of other pieces. And the other is I won't be here next month to ask questions. I'm going to be on vacation next month, so our vice chair will be taking over. No drop off, I'm sure. In fact, maybe a slight or a significant improvement in connectivity and quality of the discussion, all that. But I'm disappointed to miss the meeting, although not disappointed for to be able to get away for a little bit. But I think that this is a good opportunity for what I hope will be a robust discussion about sort of active Fairfax and the related activities, including as needed safety and things like that. So,
If you're going around, I had an alternative agenda item that I don't think I'm going to, you know, ask the TAC to change from what it looks like you're going to have. But I had a long, interesting conversation with MWA today on the noise contours. The Planning Commission is meeting tomorrow night on that issue, and probably a good chance that they will adopt what the board is looking for, so that it's unlikely that you know, MWA's position is going to be accepted by the board. If the TAC wanted to weigh in before the Board of Supervisors meeting, we'd have to do it at our June meeting. But since my reading of it right now, and I'll maybe know more after the Planning Commission meeting tomorrow, you know, if that looks like it would ultimately not have any impact, you know, I would see no reason to change what you have on the agenda. But I do want to have Dulles on the agenda before November. And they went over some participants that would, I think, really make it a productive meeting. Ideally, if we did it on site, if we were able to do it on site, we don't have COVID issues at Dulles, and bring in a couple of other people that they recommended, and possibly the transportation aides. I think it would be, you know, it could be a really productive meeting. But as far as the noise contours and the action that the board has taken on that so far, I'm not sure that there's going to be much left to change. As far as them, and maybe Mr. Skiles wants to add a sentence or two, but as I understand it, the board has approved development in the over 65 contours. That's pretty much a done deal. It's been approved. What they're still hoping to get for now is to use the 3 mitigation requirements in the 60 noise contour corridor, which is insulation in the units, a navigation easement, and notice to the prospective buyer that you're building near an airport. They would like those requirements imposed on the updated contours. And I think right now the tea leaves are saying that the board is going to do it on the old contours. So David, I don't know if you have anything to add on that, how much you've been following that, but it is your neck of the woods.
Okay.
I see his name on there, but I don't know whether he's still with us.
Okay. Yes, obviously he's not responding right now, so I think we'll need to reach out separately there. You know, Kevin, as we've talked, recognizes important issue also on, you know, some contentiousness. Now that this is the first one or the last one that we'll be dealing with, I'm sure. What's your, I know that, as you say, the planning commission is going to be meeting about this tomorrow or so. Do you know if they plan to take a trip out there? What do you think might happen, or is it still too early to really predict what the planning commission might do?
I think they're just going to be asked to sign off on it. I think, you know, I know the Braddock commissioner will be raising some objections. I tried to reach her tonight, but just got her voicemail. I don't think they're planning to take a trip out there in relation to the noise contours, but they would also be a good invitee if we do pull this off for a meeting at Dulles. One of the things that was pointed out to me today, because of COVID, you have a lot of new, you know, new members on the board of supervisors. It was a pretty good turnover, at least 4. They usually get a tour of Dulles, and because of COVID, that never happened. So if not the supervisors, at least their aides, I think, might be interested if we have that on-site meeting out there. But as far as the planning commission meeting out there to impact the decision on noise contours, I don't think that's in the works. But
okay. I would prefer, and you've already acknowledged, to go forward with the agenda as we've got it for, you know, for next month there.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think, and you've mentioned before, to have a trip to Dulles before November certainly makes sense. We don't want to go out there too late. It gets late in the year. It also gets cold. And I think that that's something that we can do on a tech meeting day, or, you know, we've had some of our activities on other days, and could also perhaps do something in the afternoon, and then have a social event afterwards with not talking business, just to make that explicit again. So Kevin, would I, love to talk to you more and maybe start fleshing some things out in terms of who would go, some of the focus areas and stuff like that. I mean, whether we're focused on the country lines, and I know it's one of the issues, but it sounds like there's more to the story too, and we don't want to forget that as well.
Yeah, but I think by the time we have that trip out there, the contours, I think, is going to be over and done with. So our ability, I mean, again, I'll follow up after the planning commission tomorrow, and if there's anything urgent that I think we, should have an impact on, I'll ask you for time at the meeting. But I honestly don't see that happening for the June meeting. But I think it very an excellent opportunity in the meeting out there, not just the tour, which is excellent in and of itself, at least the one they gave us last time, but to bring in somebody from NVTA that he had mentioned, and somebody from engineering, because there's other, the economic impact of the airport, the other interest that I have out there of growing the airport, of ease of access from the south, issues like that, as well as, bringing in possibly at least the transportation aid for the briefing that their supervisors never got, or at least the new ones. It really could be a very productive meeting. It would take, a good chunk of time, I'm sure. But instead of doing it over 2 meetings, one for the tour, one for the larger issues, I think if we, look at, and we'll talk about it, you and I, and the rest of the TAC, but if we could get that done as one meeting, I think it would be very productive.
Okay. Sure, don't rule it out. There's a lot of compelling reasons there. Recognize that. Pete, you got your hand up.
Yes, I do. Just wanted to weigh in, kind of supporting Kevin's ideas here. I know that the Mount Vernon District, through the Mount Vernon Council and others, have written letters suggesting that the Board of Supervisors and all have been using the wrong numbers, using old data, which is 18 years ago, not using well, actually longer than that, I think it's 20-something years, as compared to 2019 numbers, which would be a more realistic assessment of the situation. The Board of Supervisors obviously can make any decision they want. That's their job.
Yeah.
But like with Kevin, I have real concerns that they're using bad data.
Yeah.
So.
Right, that's exactly it, Pete. And if you're allowing development in outside of the 60 contour, which if you use the updated one would be within the 60 contour, then you would require, they would have that mitigation, the installation, the navigation easement, and the notice. And I don't know what the downside of that is to the development or to the board. They're not, MWA now is not asking that you don't develop, within the 60 contour. They just want that contour recognized. And so I don't know, what is the downside to a housing developer to putting those requirements in, the insulation, the navigation easement, and the notice?
Well, just on the one, and I'll keep it short because we got other things so we go home too. But way I understand it from people that know more than I do on this subject, the 2000 whatever, the old data, that would allow for more areas to be developed. The newer numbers show that because of the size of the planes and the frequency of the planes, that the buildable area is smaller. So it really comes down to economic development versus, well, something else, safety and security of folks on the ground. Mount Vernon, we're highly concerned because we've been pushing for quieter planes coming across our districts. And the idea that you can now maybe build at the end of the airport is not a good idea, in our opinion. So we're really concerned that it's going to undo about 8 years worth of work that we've been doing.
The answer to that, the FAA told me participated in these contours. They took into their measurements the newer planes, the quieter planes. So that has been factored into these contours. So.
Oh yeah. Anyway, but it's a shame, But unfortunately, if I was dictator of the world, it would be different. But it's not. So but I support always leaning in and trying to make people aware and try to convince them that the other argument maybe has more weight. But I understand the pressures of economic development. But big concern with the airport and other airports that this sort of stuff has happened, because it has happened at other places, is that it starts to get political pressure on reducing flights, frequencies, and everything else. So our international airport could be diminished over time, and that would be a shame. So I'll shut up on that.
It would be a tragedy. You have you have a gem. You have one of the finest airports in the country out there, and you're in a way undermining it, and that's if not unacceptable, it's unfortunate.
Yes.
Understand, and I like your last word choice there. I just sort of leave it at that. And Pete, I'll make the quick observation because, as you said, we do need to move on a little bit and finish up here. But we could very well be. I think we probably are sort of too late, so to speak. I mean, look at Route 1, things we'd like to have done, weren't able to. There could be lessons learned for the future. There may be things we can do, but I think we have to be very careful. And I've mentioned this before about trying to re-adjudicate things that have been, crafted. But all that said, I think that, it's okay for us. It's appropriate for us to sort of put our heads into things and look at stuff. We can even have a work session. I know, Kevin, how popular you those are, but if we need to do something like that, we can do that. But no, I think you make a good point about trying to do some things together there. But yes, let's talk offline. Let's put some words on paper there a little bit. One other thing I'll connect up. It connects potentially with this, but also more generally. I mentioned last month, and Pete once and I, Pete again once, he and I were part of a group that were looking helping Deputy County Executive Rachel Flynn interview some vendors who can do some I'll say policy work. It's not just sort of policies per se. They do analyses there. And so this could be one. I don't want to go that far because Rachel will make the ultimate determinations. But one of the things I talked to her about, in fact, it was this evening, was the idea of picking some topics there that the TAC can the TAC can work with these vendors on. So I'll just mention that there, and we'll look for opportunities there. So one of our future meetings, I sort of segue from the June meeting to other possible meetings, as we already sort of done here with the with the discussion of Dulles, is we can look for opportunities to involve some of the vendors and help us with a deep dive into certain areas there. So okay. The other thing I just wanted to mention as perhaps other topics for 2022, because we don't have July set, we've got a little bit of time to do that, but July will be here before we know it. Certainly something like the airport could be something, as we've discussed, perhaps coming back to the streetlight replacement issue, having a wider discussion, perhaps including Dominion at that point, and send some others. The other,
they reached out to me, by the way. Chair.
And how'd that go?
Well, yeah, that issue I raised on Park Center Parkway, they were going to send investigators out to look at the broad swath. So I'm waiting to hear back from them. This was a couple of weeks ago, but I was pleasantly surprised, that they were eager to follow up on it.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So I think that we won't try not to lose sight of that issue there. The other thing I was going to mention a bit, and Pete put you on the spot a teeny bit, but just sort of it's more thoughtful than specific. Is some of the transit-oriented development activities, the urban design standards, things like that, that we talked about in the work plan. And so, if there's some things there you think might be a good next step on some of these activities, certainly welcome your thoughts there. As I looked at the work plan, I do see making place there. It's not necessarily prominent, but I think that I know something Rachel has talked about quite a bit. So again, if there's an area we can potentially focus on or something like that, so you're definitely welcome your thoughts there as we go forward.
One other, if we're talking about agenda,
yes.
My other area of focus that I'd like to cover before the end of the year, and I need to follow up with Michael Feschlaw, but because he was eager to come out to the TAC to brief us on my concern about transit opportunities from lower income areas of the county to job centers. And but Tom, I think, asked him to wait on that before they went to the board. And he has been before the board, I believe, on that issue, I think maybe the same day that we were there for our presentation. So I need to reach out to him and see if Tom's okay with him coming back before the TAC. And if they are, I'd like to get that, scheduled this year as well.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent topic. Kevin, what's happening here is seems like many of the topics are items you're interested in and suggesting. That's fine. So I appreciate that. One thing I would just add specifically on the transit opportunities is Calvin, of course, my Alzheimer's is kicking in. Your new boss who'd expressed an interest in as well. Would like to include him because I know he's been giving some thought there to it. Remind me who it is. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember, but it's my old age. It's just relentless. Calvin, you.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, who you looking for?
It's your boss's name, the one who was
Oh.
at the meeting.
Marcus Moore?
Marcus Moore.
Yes.
Marcus Moore. I think Marcus has some ideas there. It's Kevin, something that he's been sort of carrying a torch for a little bit for years. So I think that he might have some thoughts there and some energy that he can add as well. So if you're going to reach out to Mike Feschlow, please include Marcus Moore in there as well.
Okay. Yeah, when I phone Michael, I'll ask him to touch base then with Marcus as well.
Perfect.
What's the change? Does Calvin report to Marcus and Marcus reports directly to Tom, or?
I'm not sure. I think Calvin, sorry, putting you on the spot here, but hey, you're among friends. Oh, here's Noelle. She can tell. She's in the chain of command.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right.
You're muted, Michelle.
You're not muted, but yet we're having trouble hearing you.
No, we've put Noelle in shock.
Hang up a second. No, why don't you try to recycle your mute? Maybe that'll solve it.
How about now?
No.
I can hear you barely, just barely.
Try to get closer.
No.
Could be the microphone volume, if it's an earbud microphone or anything related like that. The other alternative is that if there's anything plug in, and it needs to be jiggled.
Now.
There we go.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, sorry. So Calvin is a transportation planner 2. He reports to Marcus, who's a transportation planner 4, who then reports to Brent Riddle, who you all have seen in the past.
Yep.
I am the section chief for the coordination section, so they all are in my team. Yep. And then we have a division chief, who is Todd Wigglesworth, and then we go on to our deputy and director.
Does Calvin report up through you? Does Calvin report up through you?
There's a couple of steps. Yes, Calvin is part of my team.
Okay. All right. We're going to have one of those squiggly graphs again, Lieutenant.
Yes. Yes, exactly. No, appreciate that, Noelle. Yeah, I also lost my picture here. Yes, do know that Calvin's in your on your team there, so appreciate that. And Marcus, I know, just joined recently, and he had expressed some interest in this topic area, so wanted to give him the opportunity. So appreciate that. Appreciate that, Kevin. Okay. I think that's sort of what I have for now. I think also, come the meeting in June, talk about other topics for July at that point. We'll try and get some things set up. Kevin, given the number of ideas you've got, have a conversation. Maybe we can pick one of them. Maybe if nothing else, maybe the bus situation there, the underserved areas. But we can obviously talk about that as we go forward.
Yeah, another, and I thought I'd limit myself to 2, but I just remembered WMATA has a new executive director, so who knows, maybe toward the end of the year after he gets settled in, a Metro update might be.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Making a note. Okay. All right. Well, let me, that's what I have for agendas for upcoming meetings. And so moving on quickly to the chair's report, mentioned that I won't be here in June. There is an opportunity to provide some inputs to the Department of Transportation transportation equity activity that's going on. Rachel was kind enough to share that with me earlier. Calvin, I'll go ahead and send that to you for a distribution to the TAC, but if anybody's interested in looking at that or perhaps offering some inputs, please do take advantage of that. We will need to schedule a time for the 2021 TAC award ceremony. I don't want to plan it now, But I think that could be another, certainly as part of our meeting, or actually, sorry, at the Board of Supervisors there. So I think, in fact, as I'm thinking here, we are going to be, and I should have mentioned this and make part of it, on September 30th, and Calvin has got it in the on our agenda here. We are scheduled to meet with the board on Friday, September 30th. Agenda is TBD. Joint session, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but certainly, want to give some thought to, the topic areas we want to discuss and things like that. So we'll, certainly be in touch with Mr. Alcorn as the summer progresses. There is a Board Transportation Committee meeting that morning. So that's at 11, and then we're scheduled to be with the Board of Supervisors at 1 o'clock. So that might be an opportunity to do the TAC award, but certainly that's something we'll want to do some preparation for, and that's part of the reason that I'm thinking about being a bit more focused the next couple months on some of the things that we're talking about. So
has that been on the calendar for a while, or is that new?
It just came in a week or two ago. It was not here at our last meeting. It just came in since our last meeting.
It came in at the random, and I didn't expect that. And they would say that they would have the agenda when the time it's near. But Mike, I think for the TAC award, they usually do it on a Tuesday when the regular board meeting. So we might have to pick some other day, not that Friday.
Oh, okay. So they normally do the awards on Tuesdays then?
Yeah, so that's what I think, yeah. I think that on that Friday, they would have all committee meetings throughout the day, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'm just a little bit surprised they're having us back in September. I wouldn't be surprised to see if that gets bumped, but
well,
more power to us if we get the time.
We were on the last time, yeah. So
it could happen again. It appears to be a regular thing they do with boards, commissions, and things like that. So it looks like it's sort of our time up in the barrel. But yes, it is possible that gets pushed aside. So okay, and a sec. I'm making some notes here. Just a second. All right. So we'll look for a Tuesday. I'm not going to try and do it in this next month or so, but we can talk about that as we go forward. Certainly, I think over the summer, and then in 2022, hopefully we can get back on our regular schedule. So, okay. All right. That's what I have for the chair's report. So now I would like to give commissioners an opportunity to provide some updates here. Let me go through the list in the order that we called on you in the beginning of the meeting. So Commissioner Sperling, anything to report?
No reports or updates this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Commissioner Morse. Anything else, sir?
I don't really have anything, but just on your last point, we, not to put it negatively, but how soon would we be once again behind the 8 ball on the TAC award, or really rushing around to get it? We have no award winner for, we did 21, right? Are we up to speed? So we need to pick somebody for 2022?
Yes, we will. Yes, we will.
Okay. So we're in May now, and we hope to give the award by November, or when would we present it?
Well, we've done it historically. We did it sort of December. I think November, December. So I think what we'd like to do for the returning back to regular order is calendar year. So November of this year. We can certainly solicit sooner, warm folks up that it's coming, and then try and pick it by the end of the year, or have it be through the end of the year and then pick at the beginning of the next year.
All right. Well, when you get back and you're at the July meeting, then that maybe you want to, start organizing the committee and whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's all I have.
Okay. This is embarrassing. I hate to admit it, but I'm going to. We've also, do we not have elections every year? Don't they happen in June?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what month we do it though. Calvin, I would ask Calvin.
Yeah, let me look at the, this is my bad for not doing my.
I think if appointments are made in June, would we do them in July or August?
I think that appointment making in next month in June. So we would do it in. We would have to make the announcement in July.
Okay.
And we
We
started
can make
having
this
the,
simple. I renominate the
August.
current slate of officers.
I mean, assuming that there's no change to the attack, we can, I guess, we can start the announcement in July, start the election in August. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd make a note and add it in there, and that's boilerplate.
Yeah, exactly. And so the announcement July and then the elections in August. Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. All right. That's good. So Calvin, please, if you could, for the July agenda, please, July and August agenda, please add them. Thanks. Okay. Anything else, Kevin?
No, thank you.
Okay. I don't have anything, certainly. So Commissioner Westenhoff, Kelly.
She left early.
Okay. I know that's understandable. Commissioner Hoskin.
I have nothing to add tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Sitnick.
I apologize, but I do have something to add. Richmond Highway, we talked about last year where a lot of us looked at the original plans by FCDOT and VDOT, and what we reacted to, we said basically it was an over widening of the roadway, and that was roughly a year ago. I must commend both FCDOT and VDOT for listening and taking it back and looking at it for another year. And this is really big brush, but roughly 60% of the concerns we had, they eliminated. So that was amazing in itself. We recently had a BRT meeting, public meeting, that dealt with one intersection and the BRT. And it was a great meeting, but then we had a second meeting which had to do with lane analysis. That's what they ended up calling the next public meeting, which makes sense because most of the extra widening was dedicated right turn lanes, 2 of which, and then 2 left lanes and all sorts of stuff. And again, they had eliminated roughly 60% from being put out there. We're currently doing a survey period until the 27th and trying marshaling people to get their, but marshaling people to get their opinions in and on intersections that still maybe need more conversation. But again, I just would like to thank FCDOT and VDOT for listening, and hopefully they'll listen a little bit more before we're done. So, and just for your information, the roadway is now being engineered at 35 miles an hour. There are 2 speed studies being done. One is now, and that will be coming up probably in the next couple of months. And then there's another one after the widening, in connection with the widening. So we're very hopeful that things are going to turn out. Interesting tidbit though, and I'll shut up after that, is we got hold of some census data. And one of the things we've been saying, it needs to take care of the widening, needs, in our opinion, needs to be more of a Main Street making place, like we were talking about earlier. And, they go, well, basically the assumption is everybody has a car. Well, in one community alone, Gum Springs, which is the oldest Black community as far as I know, in the nation, 1 out of 4 people do not have a car. And they're right at one of the major intersections that will still be widened, now not at 13 lanes, but currently still planned for 11. So if you peel this back, it's not really, it's getting better, but it's really not providing equity for all at this point. So
Pete, two quick things. One, is there any, besides VDOT or FCDOT, are you getting any organized pushback on the other side of that issue of what you're trying to do? Shrink the lanes?
actually, there is resistance, and I think it's mostly historical resistance using level of service. But if they had held tightly to LOS, none of this would have shrunk. So they will say, you know, we still have to do this and it has to be by LOS and all, but they've already changed some things. So I think another 5 years down the road, we would not be having this conversation. I think they would have probably listened to more, I should say more enlightened, but a different school of thought, and maybe had planned this road differently. But it was initially, when it was first planned, was the standard: make it wider, make it faster, make it, you know, move cars through. And that's been VDOT's, you know, motive of, I can't say it now. Anyway,
Modus operandi.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ever since they came into existence, which is roughly 1930. But a lot of people beginning to listen, and that's encouraging. But just like the airplane noise, it might be too late to fix it all, but it's better, and I think we can even get some better tweaks to it between now and the final decision. So I'm hopeful, especially if citizens weigh in, which I know they are.
And the second one, when they lower it to 35, will you pay my first speeding ticket down Richmond Highway?
Be glad to.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. I may have to pay my own first one too.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Appreciate that, Pete. I will also mention further for the fellow TAC members. I was talking to Rachel earlier, as I mentioned, in a brief conversation with her. She was very complimentary of the email you sent out to the folks there in the area, trying to organize people to have the conversations. You know, last chance to get it right, and excellent work there. She was shocked, as I was, that you were able to put 3 words together. I'm joking. Excellent work there, and wanted to compliment you and thank you on behalf before the TAC for that good work there.
Well, I appreciate it, but I also have, he refuses to be called my secretary, but my note taker extraordinaire, John Biotti, does a whole lot of good polish on my work, so I owe him a lot. So, yeah.
Appreciate John's efforts on your behalf. So, thank you.
But thank you all.
Okay. All right. Next, Commissioner Glenn, anything to add?
Commissioner Glenn also had to step out.
Okay. Let's see. Next, Commissioner Hancock. Any last words for us this evening?
Yep, nothing for me.
Okay, appreciate it. Commissioner Thiel. Eric, my friend.
Yeah, just a comment based on recent experience. So one of the things I think we ought to do sometime is, particularly on some of these new crossing zones where we see lots of lanes, is I think we all ought to walk down to some of them with a batch of crutches, which you can get a pair of crutches up for about $25 on Amazon, and try it out. I advise you to bring wrist braces with you, because if you're not experienced with crutches, there's a good chance you'll do a face plant. But I'm not on crutches, but my ski instructor wife is. And we've been having some very interesting experiences with the timing of doors, door structures. And I'm pretty convinced that if the only place I find doors that are ADA compliant are on federal facilities, that every place else is dorked up, including our crosswalks. So just an observation.
Okay. All right.
I don't need the crutches since I move at about that speed anyways these days. So.
Yeah, and I'll emphasize here that she was lifting weights, you know, like deadlift 140 pounds before this happened. So I think that some of the numbers are incorrect. Thanks, Bob.
No doubt.
All
But
right.
wish you full recovery for your wife.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So,
Thank you.
and safe travels across all the streets that you need to cross. Sully District, Commissioner Skiles, anything to add, sir?
No update from me.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, David.
Could I just quickly, David, did you get any of the comments on Dulles? Did you have anything to add on the airport at all?
I did, yes. Thank you. I sent some comments in to the chair. Appreciate you asking.
Okay, maybe he can share those later. Okay.
Okay. Copy. We'll move deliberately on this as we have been. So appreciate that. And thanks, David, for the comments there. Okay, we've reached the final commissioner. So Fairfax Area Disability Services Board and our esteemed vice chair, Commissioner Jones. Anything to add?
Nothing to add. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion adjourned and seconded. There's a motion on the table. Is there any debate on the motion?
No.
Hearing no debate on the motion. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
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 Opposed to adjourning, please
Good
say
meeting,
nay.
folks.
Okay, with that, the motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned at 9:58 p.m. Thanks very much.
Mike, if you have a minute,
Sure.
Mike, if you have a minute to stay on.